Sabah al khair, ahlan wa sahlan. Good morning, everyone, to day 3 of the Abu Dhabi Finance Week. It's a great pleasure to see you all here. And the previous session actually really paves the way for our discussion on building a digital assets infrastructure built for the next decade, and that is actually fit as we are all here on stage as well. I hope you had your morning exercise, gentlemen. Let me first of all ask in the room a little show of hands. Who here thinks that the digital assets infrastructure in the world is fit for the next decade? Hands up. Oh my God.
We got some work to do.
Can I actually see one hand up? No, that means business for you, gentlemen. So each of you in 60 seconds, what is the reason why the digital assets infrastructure is not fit yet? What is the room for improvement? If I can start with you, Mike.
All right. Well, look, I think everything is an evolution. We have made great strides, and we shouldn't forget that, what we've done over the last 10 years. It got started in this in 2013. At the time, we were worried about how do you secure keys. You know, people hold the keys on their own, get hacked. There's still a bit of a problem with that. But then they put them on servers and they get hacked again. So how do you store keys properly? And I think this is a very solved problem at this point. Is it used with common practice around the globe? Not yet. Have traditional financial firms learned how to do it and embed that within their own practices? You know, not as much. Look, the traditional finance system has been plagued by not having enough technology. And building the technology that we're putting together here to build a new market structure for how we do trading of everything with transparency, reduce risk, et cetera, is hard stuff. Banks have failed to do it for decades. So to expect it to be done in a short period of 10 years, probably unrealistic. But look, we're getting there. And I think we're all here as proof of that, in spite of the fact that there's not very many hands raised yet.
So be patient, ladies and gentlemen. Konstantin, that wasn't a show of confidence. What is the main reason why? What kind of work is there to be done?
Well, I mean, first of my perspective is really on the technical infrastructure, right? So I don't look at it as a financial systems problem. I look at it as a problem of institutions connecting to open source decentralized systems. And how do you do that in a way that institutions can benefit without actually jeopardizing the integrity of the systems? And so I think, so it ties into that from my perspective, is how do you build secure rails and gateways to ultimately open source systems for institutions that need to function in a way that an institution would like it to, which means you know, the networks need to be up 99.999% of the time. They need to be active and participate in discussions around software updates in order to ensure that the systems and functions adhere to their respective regulation and standards. And so that's sort of, you know, the view we have for the company on it and that we focus on.
Right. Charles, you are one of the co-founders of Ethereum. You have a lot of fans taking selfies here with you in the room. So you really have seen this baby grow up, but apparently it's not an adult yet. So it still needs to mature. What is the remaining last steps that it has to do?
Yeah, I'm in Hawaii formal too. So we're kind of in the gangly teenage years. And, you know, I think the question is crypto ready for the markets? I mean, no one's happy with the traditional markets at the moment. $380 billion in compliance fines from 2000 to 2023 in the legacy financial world. So if U.S. government is fining $1/3 trillion for not following the rules of the best people, then it's telling you that the industry as a whole is not ready. I mean, the financial world was never designed for the internet or globalization. And it's designed to have everything be in neat little boxes, whether you're a commodity or a security or a currency, and then they kind of say, okay, this is the way we go. So what we're trying to do is do two things at the same time. We're trying to explore and experiment in the cryptocurrency space with a lot of new beautiful technologies. Like digital assets are really like a financial stem cell. They can be anything. And then we're also talking about self-sovereign identity. We're talking about settlement is compliance. There's a lot of really cool concepts on non-creds and zero-knowledge cryptography that are working their way in. At the same time, the banking industry is trying to upgrade itself to become global, and they're following standards like open banking and all these new ISOs that are coming out. And what's going to happen is they're going to come colliding into each other, which is what we're seeing right now with Binance getting hit and all these other things. And at some point, there has to be kind of a merger where you take kind of the best of both and you end up with a hybrid system that all of a sudden you have instant settlement. You have settlement is compliance. You have much better ways of regulating things that are automated, and you can have a transaction be under 60 just different jurisdictions at the same time and use libraries and these things for it. But at the same time, you also gain all the efficiencies and creativity of the cryptocurrency space, where we at any moment can build completely new ways of creating liquidity or representing IP. So I'm actually quite bullish, and I understand the skepticism, but I'm skeptical of all the systems at the moment. And we need to kind of overhaul and rebuild the things. And it's going to take 5-10 years to get it done. We're almost there, though.
Give it some time. All right. Now, to finish this opening remarks panel here, Dan, what are the main challenges facing the industry right now?
Well, we've got a very smart audience here because they're exactly correct. As it stands now, the digital infrastructure cannot handle global financial workloads. So the main problems are scale. Global financial markets work at hundreds of thousands to millions of transactions per second. None of the main solutions are there yet, though they will be over the next year. Inherent privacy at scale, so being able to maintain transaction privacy is a key issue that needs to be resolved. Inherent compliance. So some of the core ethos of blockchain, the original blockchain movement, was really run counter to the kinds of compliance that are required for safe transactions globally, where there is a responsibility for governments to oversee these things, and perhaps how intuitive the blockchain rails are to use for the casual mom and pop end user. We're not quite there yet in terms of ease of use, but that's coming as well. I think what you're seeing, though, and the exciting and positive news, is that the key elements are falling in place. I regret to say that this is my fifth ADFW, the last of as a member of Securrency, as we've been acquired by DTCC. And if you know DTCC, they are the world's largest financial market infrastructure provider, settling more than $10 trillion of transactions daily. This is the centerpiece of the global economy, and they've just gone all in on the concept of blockchain and the impact that this will have on financial markets. So we're excited about that. I'm excited to join their team here in the coming days, as this is a big breakthrough. And in fact, they're interested in making sure over the next 10 years, blockchain is the centerpiece.
That would have been my next question, but you just answered it. What is your next role? So you're still staying with the company. Congratulations. Konstantin, let's talk about the outlook already. We're nearing 2024. What trends are you seeing when it comes to investments into digital assets and currencies?
So again, I look at it as a software builder. So my perspective might be a little different. I think one thing we've seen as a company is that we've always had a lot of institutional interest all the time. And so major shareholders in our company are Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Citibank, Comcast. And so companies that over the last years have worked with us also as customers to build institutional infrastructure. I think what you will see is the accumulation of progress within the system design that has occurred there. I think you'll see probably, in the US at least, some progress around ETFs, of course, but and around the world, a faster adoption around transaction settlement on chain, as well as reward earning, and much more innovative key management solutions and things. So ultimately, you can assume that there is going to be more volume in the systems over time. But again, there's a lot of work to be done. But I think the large-scale sort of top 10 institutions in the world have never ceased to build decentralized infrastructure, and so there's always been a good progress there.
Yeah, let's ask Charles, the man himself who has a lot of experience in developing currencies. Will we see more Ethereums or like Ethereum currencies or other assets that will shape our future?
You can mention Cardano. But, of course, there's over 30,000 plus cryptocurrencies. You're going to always see more, and they have their place and purpose, and they're starting to move into different forms. So in the beginning, it was, hey, we just need an asset. Now they're starting to represent replacing centralized services. So a decentralized LLM or a decentralized social network, like a replacement for Twitter. Jack Dorsey's very interested in that with his whole app protocol thing that he's doing. So of course, we'll see a very rich and vibrant ecosystem of these things, but also we're having deep conversations about how to replicate things that you're doing in the legacy world, like stable coins. There's algorithmic stable coins, and there's been a lot of progress and missteps there. World Mobile's building a decentralized ISP, and they're trying to figure out how do you be a cell phone company and be global and decentralized at the same time. So that's exciting, and there's huge technical challenges that need to be resolved. But what gets me most excited is that preservation of the core philosophy of it, is that people are their own bank, people are their own identity, they own their own data. You know, there's a libertarian streak that I have, and I think the world works a lot better when you have freedom at the end of the day. And it's nice that there's still some adherents floating around the space that love that. And there's some people that love BlackRock, and we just have to figure out how to put both of them together.
Yeah. Now, two keywords, interoperability and localization, are really buzzing right now and very important for the survival of the industry, of course, as well. Dan, what in your business case have you learned about those two words?
Well, interoperability is key. So two kinds of interoperability between blockchain rails. So we see the emergence of many highly viable blockchain solutions like Charles Cardano and many others that are solving these problems. Well, the last thing you would ever want is there to be only one solution, because that would be the end of innovation. So what that means is there will be many blockchain solutions, and what's required is interoperability. Also, I think blockchain market cap, crypto market cap is about $1.5 trillion, but most of the world's value is still far more value in traditional assets. So in fact, interoperability between traditional financial rails and blockchain rails is the key to actually bringing the value into blockchain networks, but just as much as you can bring it in, you also need to bring it out of blockchain rails for us to really reach the vision that we want to get to.
You mentioned before during coffee break that you are based in DC, Dan, and obviously headquarters of regulators there as well. And on regulation, Mike, you told me before that regulators are confused and there are many piecemeal regulations out there. So let's for a moment talk about regulation, Mike. We have, of course, the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, which has established a lot of frameworks based in Switzerland, where I'm from. What should regulators do, in your opinion?
Sure. Well, look, I think the word regulation needs to be broken down into the actual details behind it. So prior to what's going on today with blockchains changing the way we do finance, a lot of this kind of fell into place and has been somewhat static. Legislators do not necessarily know how it works, and yet they are
One moment.
expected to.
Do we have a hand mic? Or speak? Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Sorry about that. So regulators have a challenging job of really breaking down kind of what regulations matter more, which matter less. So we hear confusion. Like last year, after FTX failed, Senator Elizabeth Warren comes out and says the problem we have is we don't have enough AML KYC for crypto. Well, that wasn't the issue. She's quite confused as to what the issue was. And when you break down regulation, I think it comes into three broad categories. Number one is law enforcement, AML, KYC, transaction monitoring, sanctions controls, et cetera. Number two would be like consumer protections. This is where the SEC comes into play. Did you disclose what the asset is, how it works? Are you working to get the best price for your clients, preventing pump and dumps, things like that? The third one is market structure. And market structure really hasn't been addressed very well yet. Frankly, we're still operating in these very verticalized stacks where single players are providing all of the functions from the broker-dealer to the exchange to the custodian in a single. I broke 2 microphones in one session. Okay.
They will send you the invoice later, I'm sure.
All right, so trying to finish that. I guess I speak really loud.
It's coming back. Let's try again, one more time.
Okay, so there we are. Oh, now it's super loud. All right, so of course, regulators are a little bit confused because there's so many different aspects to it.
Yeah.
And I think where we could start, which would really help everybody, would be to prioritize a little bit. Some types of regulation really matter. Like, you don't want to have all-out catastrophic losses. What we had with Sam Bankman-Fried and fraud, we can stop that. You stop that with market structure, right? Rug pulls, we can stop that. Those are both elements that happen when you don't have market structure. I think we should prioritize to the top of the stack. Look, investor disclosures are really important as well, but they pale in comparison to the catastrophic losses. Blocking the library token which I know nothing about, and I'm not endorsing it in any way. I don't know anybody that was hurt by that. And yet, regulators are prioritizing fixing that as opposed to fixing the real problem. So yes, I think there's a lot of work to do. I think we're getting closer. We're seeing it globally. Some jurisdictions are ahead of others. So for everyone that's behind, like the US, there's one that's ahead, like here in the UAE, both in Dubai and Abu Dhabi.
Okay. You kept this microphone going. Thank you so much, Mike. Anyone else on the panel would like to comment on regulation? Dan.
I think one of the keys is regulating based on first principles. So Mike raised exactly the right issues. Blockchain is just a technology. The regulatory principles are correct. The regulatory frameworks that are in place are the right general principles. Blockchain is just a means to achieve this. And when regulators get confused by blockchain, the technology, what they really ought to be thinking about is, in fact, what implications this have on the three basic principles that Mike just laid out. That takes a bright regulator, and we do see this here, that the regulators at FSRA here in ADGM are among the world's brightest. And they've really set up a regulatory framework that's based on first principles. It makes it a fantastic place where you can operate freely and build real solutions that are meant to last. There's no shortcuts, so it's not an easy regulatory framework, but it is one that doesn't block blockchain just because it's a different technology.
Yes, Charles?
Yeah, I think it's very important. You have to take a step back and understand that regulation is very difficult, especially with the US-centric approach, because there's a conflation of two things. Normally, when we think about regulation, we think about law enforcement, we think about consumer protection, and all that's fine, and most reasonable people are easy to do. But the other side of regulations is geopolitical side. There's a weaponization, especially of the Treasury Department, and it's a big part of US foreign policy is the sanctions regime and using regulation as a cudgel to basically enforce how they want to run things. And that's fundamentally incompatible with European regulation, Chinese regulation, the regulation here. And I think blockchain is kind of it's in the middle of the no man's land of that reality as the world is having a broader discussion as it globalizes of, is this regime still the one we want to be with? And what's really comfortable about ADGM and VARA and all these other places here in the UAE is they don't have that goal. They think only about consumer protection. They think only about the standard stuff that you would think is common sense. And so you have these amazing conversations, and it's really easy to work with them. It's really easy to talk with them, and it's very refreshing. Whereas the U.S. side, it's like a sphinx because it changes based upon what the geopolitics look like. We were friends with Russia, now we're not. We were friends with China, now we're not. So all the financial regulation reflects that, and who you're allowed to talk to and do business with and what's good business looks very different every 4 years, which is really frustrating.
It's great to be here in Abu Dhabi, the capital of capital, right? So you should maybe expand a bit more internationally as well, Charles. Konstantin, you with Black Diamond are located and headquartered in Los Angeles, and you focus on wallet and node management and stacking solutions and so on. As you're from a software development industry and background as well, what are some of the new innovations that you at your company are putting all your efforts in?
Well, I think, we probably run 25% of the global institutional node infrastructure. So we run around 170,000 nodes across 70 data centers. I think really, to maybe tie it together with regulation, ultimately, I think there's $1 trillion in annual transaction fees made around the world, and ultimately regulators are protecting that revenue stream to, for existing financial legacy systems, a little bit like music publishers were 20 years ago when music became pixelized. And so we see the same thing here. And so for us, the main role and main focus is working with institutions and educating them on how they can participate in generating this revenue on cryptocurrency rails, right? And so that's about, how do you participate in oracles? How do you think about, nodes? How do you think about ultimately validating transactions? And how do you think about safely procuring keys and ensuring that ownership of assets rests with individuals? And so I think for us, that's like the biggest part we currently play is really education around the very complex technical stack and revenue opportunities for institutions when it comes to participating in this space. I think there's still a lot of confusion there. I think terminology is really, really difficult. And so one thing we've observed is when you talk to different banks and you can use, most companies in crypto, we all sound fairly similar, but we do very substantially different things. And so I think there's still a lot of educational services to be done there for sure.
Absolutely. Mike, at your company, BitGo, your slogan is deploy your capital. So not sit on it, but really put it to work. So what do you do differently maybe? And how do you do this in the most profitable way for your clients?
Well, it's not quite our slogan, but we do try to help people do that.
Okay.
Look, the markets for any other asset class are pretty well defined in terms of what roles are there with broker dealers and exchanges and custodians. So for those that are just trying to build their business and have access to financial markets, you know how all these things plug together. Today in the crypto world, things are much more isolated, and we are trying to de-risk the systems that we have by separating some of these functions. By the way, it's kind of funny when you think about business models. I think it was Jim Barksdale said there's only two business models, bundling and unbundling, right? And so what do we have with crypto markets? We have the perfectly bundled all services in one at Coinbase, right? And we know where that leads in terms of risk. Regulators work to isolate risk and to contain risk. We need to make sure that we separate things apart. So anyway, for BitGo, we want to make it, you can have it in custody and you can still have access to liquidity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's tough. So building that market structure, be able to settle without having to compromise by pre-funding out at exchanges where you may not know, how good the risk management is there. Those are the types of things we're doing. Collateral management, these types of things we move up the stack in terms of services to our clients.
Yeah. Then with security, you focus a lot on tokenization and decentralized finance, of course. What's next for your business? What kind of developments are you working on?
We think institutional DeFi, decentralized finance, is the key. So among the most traded digital assets, the most liquid digital assets are US treasuries riding on institutional rails currently, with billions being traded daily in some of the markets. It's sort of a little known secret. So there's been an emergence of real world assets and the tokenization of real world assets. Working with a partner, Wisdom Tree, we've got now over a dozen regulated 1940 Act funds, the most regulated asset in arguably the most regulated environment in the US, that are now available to retail customers throughout the US. And you can get access in the same site to commodities, cash, crypto, and regulated funds or securities in one convenient experience that settles in seconds. So that's an exciting marketplace, but the tokens are only the start. Most financial transactions, most liquidity comes from swaps, repos, securities lending transactions, et cetera. This is really where the market will go. It is the killer app for crypto, or for blockchain. And so we're excited about those kinds of lending scenarios, securities, collateral, and borrowing.
You're going to be a busy man going forward. Charles, your new baby Cardano is already today one of the biggest cryptocurrencies by market cap and also a blockchain platform. But we have seen so many wild market swings. Do you expect more price stability going forward?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, especially when the institutional money comes in the marketplaces. I mean, there's kind of an exit of some of the older companies like Binance got hit recently. Maybe MetaMask is going to get hit. A lot of people are getting hit these days, and then new people come in, shakes things up, and everything changes. So I suspect that we'll probably see a bull run in 2025, and it's going to bring a whole bunch of new capital and people. And institutional side is going to look very promising then. So we're probably going to see the security token revolution somewhere between 2025 and 2030. A lot of ESG stuff is going to move into our space as well, and that's going to be a big a growing area. And a lot of federation plays where corporations realize they can't go it alone, and they start consolidating by forming federations. Like AI, they'll start doing probably a lot of stuff through blockchain technology. So that'll be fun and exciting. And of course, there's still always going to be a demand for Bitcoin and all the the blue chips inside the space. And we're having a lot of fun along the way. But the biggest area of growth is likely going to be the bridge between the regulated and the unregulated world. How that's going to work. We call that regulated value transfer protocol. And it's super complex because it's not one problem, but it's a collection of problems. And also it requires favorable jurisdictions to automate their regulations and bring them into code. And only when you bridge those two things can you actually get DeFi that is decentralized but regulated at the same time. So I suspect we'll see a lot of experiments next year, and then we'll see a full realization of that by about 2025, 2026. But that's going to bring a few $1 trillion of value into the space.
Exciting times. Before we finish with a closing question to you all, I have to ask this as well because we have COP28 coming up in Dubai in a few days. There's been a lot of criticism about cryptocurrencies when it comes to climate change and really being harmful to the to the planet. Any one of you wants to address this question? What kind of efforts are being done right now to address this topic?
The entire Cardano network runs on less power than this building consumes. So, we solved that already.
Anyone else?
There's a ton of
Ben?
innovation in layer ones,
Yeah.
but also what you see is assets like carbon trading that are occurring on blockchain rails. So there's an opportunity to make that, to engage and transform sustainable finance.
Yeah, it's not an inherent problem of cryptocurrency. It's also what energy you use and how, and ultimately, those are systematic problems that you can optimize over time.
I think there's more political debate about cryptocurrencies and use of energy as a way to make that debate happen than practicality to it. You look at new ways to utilize unused energy, and Bitcoin and proof of work systems can absolutely utilize that. Does it take time? Sure. You don't build those things until you actually have the need for it. This happened. This is not a real issue.
A lot of pressure on COP28 in Dubai for sure, and policymakers there. Hopefully we can see a lot of agreements and outcomes. We are almost done. I have to watch my Swiss watch a little bit. But final question, what is the #1 trend over the next 5 years in this industry, Dan?
Real-world assets on blockchain rails.
Charles?
The merger of regulated and unregulated, which
Constantine?
enables the real world
Yeah.
assets.
Yeah, I think regulated on-chain transactions.
Yeah. And Mike?
Creating a global financial system that actually all ties together instead of the fiefdoms that we have today.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That was the look into the crystal ball for the future. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you all. Shukran Gasilan.